Thanks for coming. We're going to talk about the CIS Critical Controls Implementation Group 1. Hopefully everyone's at least heard of it before. I'm a huge fan of this, which is why I wanted to talk about it today. There's the agenda. I won't give you all that. Quick background, I've been into business for about 30 years, most of it as a software engineer. And having seen an enormous amount of crappy code, I'm concerned our whole society is going to burn down if we don't get really serious about security. And I think one way to get there is Implementation Group 1 of the CIS controls. If you're not familiar with Statista, this is a great resource. I'm sure everyone in the room already understands the risks out there, so I'm not going to belabor this too much. But I always like to try to make the point, like you see these headlines all the time, and probably a lot of you feel the same sort of low-level rage I do trying to convince businesses to take this seriously, right? I spend most of my time very frustrated because I'm out talking to businesses about this all the time in the Northern Kentucky, Greater Cincinnati region, and most of them don't take this seriously. Is this sort of common to all of you, I'm assuming? Business people don't get it, don't take it seriously, don't believe this is going to happen to them until it does, unfortunately. And I always like to point out, because it's one thing to have Microsoft, Google, DHS, whomever giving you all these sort of fear, uncertainty, doubt statistics. But if you look at the insurance side of it, right, this is from Coalition, a company that writes cyber insurance policies. You see the other side of it, right? This stuff, again, I'm probably not telling you anything you don't know. This stuff is real, right? It's very real. It's coming for every organization if they don't take this seriously. And for those of you who might be from the Northern Kentucky or Greater Cincinnati area, you may have heard of this Kettering Health debacle. If you haven't heard of it, it's quite devastating. Kettering Health is a fairly large health chain in the Dayton area. Ransomware attack on May 20th, and as recently as 2 weeks ago, they still had systems down. Apparently, they got everything, all of the PHI, everything has been compromised, from what I've heard from people that work there. So, I mean, it's completely devastating. Who knows, did people die because they had to be diverted to another place to get the care they needed? I don't know. I'm sure all of that will come out, but totally devastating. If you look into this, it's really bad, which kind of gets us to here. Your keyboard, or everyone's keyboard, is kind of like a grenade now, right? One wrong press of the keyboard, you got a keystroke logger, you got some ransomware, everything goes bad, right? And for those of you who know who Miko is, I'm a big fan of this guy. I love this quote. We're no longer securing computers, we're securing society. Everything's digital, everything's interconnected. Our whole society depends on this stuff. And again, you can look at that Kettering Health as a real world example of the bad stuff that's coming if we don't get serious about this. So again, my argument to you all today is, if you're not familiar with the Center for Internet Security, they have an enormous amount of amazing resources, and they will make it relatively easy for you to get into this without a lot of heavy lifting. Let's just jump into that. So they've been around for a long time. They're primarily known for the CIS controls and the CIS benchmarks. The benchmarks are essentially free resources for you to harden just about every kind of system you can imagine under the sun. They do a bunch of other stuff as well. Again, I'm going to focus mostly on the CIS controls today, but I just can't stress enough how useful their resources are. They got about 7,000 members worldwide. For example, Entrust, we pay to have access to the Secure Suite and all their extended tools. But a vast majority of this stuff is available to you for free. You just got to go there and get the stuff, right? And it's crowdsourced from experts around the world. It's constantly being updated. Again, they just have an enormous amount of resources. And one of the things I was saying before this, and one of the reasons why I'm such a fan of these guys, when we get into this in more detail, you'll see they've done a really good job, in my opinion, of making the safeguards, that's what they call the individual controls in each one of the control families, easy for non-technical people to understand. So when you have to sit across from someone that has to sign the checks for this stuff, it's not some vague NIST mumbo jumbo that no one can understand. Most of it is relatively understandable to the average person, and even if it's not, it doesn't take that much to explain it to them. So I have found for people who are willing to take this seriously, it's a lot easier to convince them to go down this route versus something like 800-171 or ISO 27001 or something like that. And then as you'll see, they've also done a good job of cross-mapping all of their stuff to just about every other control framework under the sun. So this is from the Center for Internet Security, prioritized set of CIS safeguards to defend against the most prevalent attacks against networks and systems. This got started, and I love this. This is quite a mouthful here. It was originally called Critical Security Controls for Effective Cyber Defense. And then that it got started in 2008, primarily due to the same things we hear about that brought around CMMC, right, and losses in the defense industrial base. It was originally created by SANS and called the SANS Top 20. It was transferred to the Council on Cybersecurity in 2013 and ultimately landed with the Center for Internet Security in 2015. So they've been at this for a while. It's gone through multiple iterations, and I didn't really start paying attention to it until version 7. I think it's continued to progress, and I think the changes they've made have actually made it much better. The latest version came out in 2024. This was stolen straight out of their material. You can see here the basic focus is prescriptive and prioritized by data. That's another thing that's nice about it, and this whole idea of IG1, right? It's prioritized for you. It's a maturity level. You don't have to try to eat the elephant all in one bite. You can start at the basic level, this IG1 we're going to get into here in a minute, and work your way up from there. Effective and measurable, scalable, cost-effective, mapped to global policy and data frameworks. Again, there's probably no well-known framework you could name that they have not cross-mapped their safeguards to. And widely adopted globally. So there's 18 control families in this latest version. Then you've got 153 total safeguards. They used to be called sub-controls. And then some of the other changes they made in this latest version, which again is still relatively fresh, realigned to NIST CSF 2.0. And you'll see how this works in a minute if you haven't seen it before. It's got new and expanded glossary definitions, and they've revised the asset classes and the safeguard mapping. So again, I believe each time they make it a little easier to understand and easier to see how it fits in with the other things people would be familiar with, like CSF. It's all based around the community defense model. I won't read all of this to you. Again, these are direct quotes, but you can see here, the goal of CDM is to help enterprises determine if the controls they are implementing actually protect them against the most prevalent real-life attacks. And you'll see how this is connected to MITRE and the Verizon data breach report and so forth here in a minute. But again, they're not just speculating. They're looking at real-world information from other organizations, feeding that into their models, and then ultimately this community defense model is the driver for these are the safeguards that actually work to protect against real-world attacks, not just some speculative stuff that's kind of an abstract academic kind of thing. As I mentioned, mapped to just about every framework under the sun, currently 25. And this is most of these, when you see this sort of look, I stole it straight out of their documentation. Again, all of this stuff is out there, and the vast majority of it is free to you. You just got to go download the stuff. So here's all 18 controls. And you're going to see a recurring theme here, the idea of you can't protect things if you don't know you have them. You have to have an inventory of things, right? Sort of a fundamental concept. If you don't know what is connected to your network, how can you possibly protect it, right? So you're going to see this inventory theme recurring through many of the top level controls. So you got inventory and control of enterprise assets, inventory and control of software assets, data protection, secure configuration of enterprise assets and software, account management, access control management, continuous vulnerability management, audit log management, email and web browser protections, malware defenses, data recovery, network infrastructure management, network monitoring and defense, security awareness and skills training. What a concept, right? You actually have to train people so they know how to avoid these kind of things. Service provider management, which is a relatively new addition to the control, and I think is extremely important because third-party risk, because of the interconnected nature of everything, continues to rise. Application software security, incident response management, and penetration testing. So those are your top-level controls. You can see like IG1, IG2, IG3. So again, this is a maturity model. Ideally, if you accomplish everything in IG1, you might want to move on to the additional controls that IG2 would bring all the way up to 3, right? So your 3 implementation groups, they call implementation group 1 essential cyber hygiene. They used to call it basic cyber hygiene. And the idea here is this is the table stakes stuff every organization, no matter how large it is, no matter what resources they have, no matter how mature their IT and cybersecurity practices are doing. And I'm hoping most of you will agree as we go through these things just make sense, right? And again, one of the reasons why I like this is you can sit down across the table from the person signing the check and start to dig into these things, and it's easy for them to understand in almost every case, right? So IG1 is what we're going to focus on here today. You can see according to CIS, it's the definition of essential cyber hygiene and represents a minimum standard of information security for all enterprises. IG1 assists enterprises with limited cybersecurity experience or expertise, rather, thwart general non-targeted attacks, right? And so there are 56 safeguards or controls in the IG1 level. So this is another definition. I won't read the whole thing to you from CIS, but safeguards selected for IG1 should be implementable with limited cybersecurity expertise and aimed to thwart general non-targeted attacks. These safeguards will also typically be designed to work in conjunction with smaller home office, commercial off-the-shelf hardware and software. So again, any organization of any size should be able to implement all 56 of these safeguards. Now, it's my experience in practice, most of them are doing almost none of these, which is why we're in the screwed up mess that we're in, okay? But again, I think once you get into this and you start to understand them, these things are relatively easy to explain to people, and they've even done a good job. Now, unfortunately, you got to get like 8 different documents to kind of put all the pieces together that I tried to cover in this presentation. but they've even done a good job of explaining, like, well, what would it cost to do this? And obviously that's going to depend on your organization and existing tools and resources you have, but they've pretty much given you everything you need, in my opinion, to build a very compelling case about why every business can and should be doing this. I love this quote, again, straight out of their documentation. IG1 is not just another list of good things to do. It's the essential set of steps to help enterprises deal with the most common types of attack we see in real life. And then, again, it's based off the community defense model. So why would you do this? Hopefully, by the time you're done, you're going to like, hey, this makes all the sense in the world. I should be doing this in my organization, and I should be proselytizing this to everyone that will listen. Prevent common attacks. Gain visibility into assets. Again, this idea of assets, you're going to just see this theme repeated over and over and over. You have to know what you have in your environment, or there's no way to defend it. Control access, and then detect and respond to incidents. So those are 4 of the main themes, even at level 1, you're going to get if you implement these controls / safeguards. It's cost effective. It's trying to leverage existing tools. Again, it's not telling you have to go on and buy the latest and greatest of everything. And it's prioritized, right? It's a maturity model. Even within a given level, you can sort of follow what they've prioritized based on what they're seeing out there. You have measurable outcomes. And again, this is the underpinnings of the higher levels, IG2 and IG3, assuming that makes sense for your organization. Again, the IG1 is really designed for smaller organizations, limited IT experience, limited IT resources. And to me, this really almost sums the whole thing up right here. So using the MITRE ATT&CK framework, based on the research they're constantly doing, they're telling you that if you just get to IG1, right, if you implement all 56 of the IG1 safeguards, you're going to stop 77% of malware attacks, 78% of ransomware attacks, 86% of web application hacking, 86% of insider and privilege misuse, and 83% of targeted intrusions. And again, this is just the basic stuff. Obviously, as you can see there, if you get to all CIS safeguards, you're getting close to 95% on average of stopping just about every kind of attack out there. Now, obviously, nothing is bulletproof, but again, this is all based on real-world experience and them working through this continuously with experts around the world. All right, I already mentioned this before, the recurring theme of inventory. This also is from the documentation, and if you just sort of if you just look at this, right, I need to know all the devices in my network. And this is one of the things that trips most people up. If you do some sort of audit against this and you really read the language in the safeguards, and I'm only going to really drill down into one for the sake of time here, you'll see, I mean, they are very explicit. Like they're saying everything, bring your own device, you name it, you got to have an inventory of all of it, right? Because any one of those things is a potential attack vector. So devices, software, data, users, network, and documentation. You need an inventory of all of these things. So let's take a look at each one of the controls and then the safeguards. Again, we won't have time to get too deep into any of these, but I did want to dive into the first one a little bit simply because it sort of sets the stage for everything else, right? You have to know the hardware assets in your environment, the enterprise assets. So you've got inventory and control of enterprise assets. You've got two controls or safeguards that apply to IG1s, right? There are more, but they only apply to IG2 and IG3. Establish and maintain a detailed enterprise asset inventory and address unauthorized assets. That's what you should be doing as an IG1, right? And then you can see they also give you an asset type, which is useful when you look at the overall framework, and then the security function that belongs to from NIST CSF 2.0. So again, when you have to sit across the table and convince people to spend money on this, that don't believe in any of this, think this is all crap, think this is all just an expense, this is where I believe this becomes very handy. So this is taken straight out of the CIS controls version 8.1 documentation. Again, I'm not going to read all this to you, but if you read through that first paragraph there, actively manage, and then they kind of tell you what it's all about. So this is setting you up for the whole family of controls. Why is this important to you as a business, right? And then they explain why it matters. So if you don't have a way to explain this to business people in a way they can understand, they've already done the heavy lifting for you. And I think if you go read this stuff, you'll see it's all very easy to understand. It's not technical at all. It's focused on things like risk and outcomes and such. So this is the specific description of each of these two safeguards taken straight out of the controls documentation. Okay. Again, I'm not going to read all of this to you. It's way too long for that. But I'm just going to shut up for a second and just sort of read a little bit of that. And again, you'll see, in my opinion, this is a perfect example of why these things make sense when you have to explain it to the people signing the check. And each safeguard has a very detailed description like this, and I would argue out of the entire set of them, there's maybe 5 or 6 that you might need a little bit of extra explanation to convince someone why it would apply. But again, if you're shooting for small organizations with limited resources, IG1's where you want to be. Most of these things are pretty simple. However, again, they also are very detailed, right? So MDM type tools can support this process. Inventory includes assets connected to the infrastructure physically, virtually, remotely, and those within cloud environments. Right, and that's where then some of this starts to go off the rails because it's very expansive. They're basically telling you have to know everything no matter where it is or how it's connected. Now, if you stop and think about it, well, who disagrees with that? Right? I mean, any device that's connected to your network somewhere is a potential attack vector for the bad guys, right? But a lot of times in trying to do audits around this is where it starts to fall apart because it's like, well, we have no idea what people are using from home. And we're not going to spend money to figure that out. Well, okay, good luck with that.
Question for you on that.
Yeah.
So does CIS acknowledge that the confidence level or the erroneous of any estimate platform is never 100%? And how do they reconcile that?
Well, that is an excellent question. That's an excellent question. And I don't have a perfect answer for you, but another thing they've done that I love is they put together, it's a separate document. Again, you got to kind of pull all these pieces together. But if you go to the Establishing Essential Cyber Hygiene document, they give you suggestions for every tool to answer every one of these things. So yeah, I agree with you. They're like, okay, what would be the common platform that would have the user inventory and the documentation inventory and the service provider inventory? And I'm not aware of anything that does all of that, right? Like RMM tools will get the hardware, might get some of the software. But in terms of having all that in one comprehensive place, I'm not aware of anything that can just do that on its own.
Actual number of computers, right? My antivirus says I have 8,271. My Active Directory says I have 7,222. And my all the software management system says I have 7,221. Like, which one is it?
Yeah, I don't have a great answer for you there because obviously, you know, if you have a software agent like, yeah.
Does CIS that problem, and do they have any suggestions around it?
I don't know that they have any suggestions around it. I think they get that that's a potential issue. And I think that's part of why, again, when you get into the detail of each one of these, you need an inventory of X. It's very specific. And I realize even at like IG1 level, it's a high bar, right? In a large organization, it's really hard to know, do I have every single asset accounted? Right? And then you got people bringing in their idiotic IoT coffee maker and plugging the damn thing in, right? Now, ideally, if you're doing all the other things they're telling you to do, you would know that that showed up and you would address that unauthorized thing because it would either be blocked or at least you would know. But, you know, in the smaller businesses we work with, none of them are doing any of this stuff. They have no idea what's connected in their environment, right? They have no idea when someone is bringing in something from home and plugging the thing in and, you know, what potential security problems that creates. But they do have, again, all these awesome resources. So if you're thinking, okay, I understand why I might want to do X, Y, or Z, well, where would I go to get the resources to do that? This document has just about everything you could, at least as a starting point. I'm not saying it has every answer to everything, but you've got all of this very well vetted information they've already compiled for you out there. And by the way, all of this is free. Everything I've talked about so far, it's all free to you. It costs nothing to access this stuff. Yes.
Say sort because they have a separate module for risk assessment methodology, and in there it talks about, for lack of a better term, the known unknowns, and so they tell you how to address that, but nothing really direct.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Follow up on that is, you know, especially with the CIS stuff, it's not an audit. You're assessing your maturity level or having a third-party vendor. And so that, you know, if your inventory doesn't match up, that's going to be left as in progress. And then over hopefully the next year, you're going to drive towards addressing whatever discrepancy that is. And if your tools aren't giving you the answer you want, it may be time to change tools.
Yeah. Good point.
So it can be considered, depending on how you're approaching it. They do have a full accreditation you can do, and you can be accredited, which is a lot of fun. It's like the way your point is, it's are you doing it within the risk tolerance of your organization? I think that's what you're getting at, right? Like I have 12,000 devices. I'm showing 11.5. Like, am I okay with that margin of error? And what are you doing to like? How are you dealing with that? Like the tool sprawl thing is a real thing. obviously, but
I think in my mind, made the most important point. At the end of the day, there's not an endless well of cash for this stuff. It's always about risk, right? And risk tolerance. How much risk will your organization accept? Now, I would argue most of them don't really understand the risk. And if they did, they would accept a lot less of it, but they're just kind of flying blind, waiting to smash into the wall. But I think you're right. And yeah, again, you may never get, if you sit down and you read each one of these controls in depth, my guess is it's going to be difficult to say with 100% certainty that yes, we are 100% compliant with each one of these things. Yes,
Right.
good point. Yeah.
like from an asset perspective, the fact that you know the gap exists means you're probably ahead of most people.
I would
Like,
totally agree with that. Yeah.
probably all more. So it was like maybe do that at a point in time, but then Bob brought in their coffee maker and I brought in my new cell phone, and it's like it's just life.
Yeah.
Sure. One point I would add to this is now, I would say the last 5 years, maybe a little longer, there have been the creation of all these new unified asset management tooling,
Yeah.
where you can take your Active Directory, your antivirus, your all these different sources of asset data, unify them, deduplicate them, and if you have the resource to do that, go for it, because that's really going to help your asset management.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So, family two, inventory and control of software assets. Again, I'm not going to go into the detail in the rest of these. I'm just going to touch on them. But hopefully, again, you're going to see this asset theme. And I would love for anyone in here who disagrees with any one of these safeguards to speak up, because I don't have all the answers again, but I'm a big believer in this thing because I think they make sense. And I think if you read through what each one says, you'll ultimately find this whole thing just makes a lot of sense, right? So, inventory and control of software assets. So establish and maintain a software inventory. Ensure authorized software is currently supported. I mean, that is in and of itself a heavy lift in many organizations, right? Do you even say, okay, this is what we're going to allow you to use, and if you want to use something that's not on this list, you can't without some kind of exception. I can tell you the vast majority of businesses we're working with have no idea what people have installed out there, and generally are not blocking anything, right? They're just letting people do whatever they want, and you have no idea what in the hell is happening out in your environment. And then address unauthorized software, right? So again, if anyone disagrees, I would love to hear the rationale for why. Data protection. Okay, another thing, again, in the places I'm talking to, they're not doing the vast majority of these things, right? So establish and maintain a data management process. That's another theme, right? Many of these start with you have to have a process or a policy, and then it descends from there. Most of the businesses I'm dealing with don't have any policies around any of this stuff. They're just totally flying blind. Establish and maintain a data inventory. Also a pretty heavy lift, especially in a large organization, right? Because someone's got to think about, well, how do you characterize all of this stuff? Configure data access control lists, enforce data retention, securely dispose of data, and encrypt data on end user devices. Now, again, when you read that, that's every device. Anything that could support encryption, you're supposed to encrypt it all. Is that happening in most organizations? No, it is not, based on my experience. Yeah. Well, yeah. Exactly. Once they get the ransomware, well, then you can check that one. I am fully compliant now with this particular safeguard. Good point. Oh, I'm going to use that again. That's a good one. Secure configuration of enterprise assets and software. So again, you can see even at IG1, there's a lot of things they're telling you to do. I would love to hear from you all tell me that I'm wrong about this, but almost no one we're working with is doing any of these things unless we're doing it for them, right? They're not doing these things. Establish and maintain a secure configuration process. Establish and maintain secure configuration process for network infrastructure. Configure automatic session locking on enterprise assets. Implement and manage a firewall on servers. Implement a firewall on end user devices. Securely manage enterprise assets and software, and manage default accounts. Even the default account thing. I mean, something as simple as that. I would go in and see like people just plug stuff in and it works, and they're happy it works, like that idiotic internet connected coffee maker you don't need. I despise the Internet of Things. I could go off on this for the rest of the afternoon. It's just a total, complete privacy and security dumpster fire. But nevertheless, account management. Even this, I'm curious, how many of you walk in somewhere new and you look at their Active Directory and it's just a complete debacle? There's accounts that have, someone's been gone for 3 or 4 years and the thing's just running wide open, right? Again, how can you protect things if you don't know what you have, right? So establish and maintain an inventory of accounts, use unique passwords, disable dormant accounts, and restrict administrator privileges to dedicated accounts. See that all the time too. You know, someone's got administrator privileges, they're using it for their daily drivers. It's, again, I probably not telling any of you anything you don't know, but it's just shocking to me how few people seem to understand this. And again, this is one of the reasons why I'm a fan for this, because if I go in and talk to you as a business and why you should be doing all of these things, right? You know, I am, many people who know me will tell you my nickname is Doomsday Dave, because I'm always like the doom guy. Your whole shit's going to burn down. It's going to go bad. You know, society's going to collapse. Buy more bullets is usually what I'm telling people, right? And, you know, business people don't want to hear that kind of stuff. So I can come in with this and say, this isn't my opinion. This isn't Intrust's opinion, right? This is well vetted, globally known information from crowdsourced experts around the world that came up with this, right? So I find it makes it easier to have this conversation and to try to get them to take it seriously, because it's not just my opinion. So anyhow, that's at the end. It's at the end. I have a QR code you can scan. Yeah, right. Yeah, yes. Sandbags and bullets. Yeah. Access control management. And even this, establish an access granting process. Again, we talk to so many companies, they don't have any sort of formalized process about like who has access to what, right? Well, how can you know? And yeah, who here has not experienced the sprawl of, well, this person's been here a long time and they've had 6 different roles, so they have permissions to all kinds of stuff that they should, right? I see a lot of head shaking. I mean, I know I'm not saying anything you guys don't know, but that's why I like this, because it crystallizes it for people and it makes it easy to explain. Establish an access revoking process. Getting back to the disabled dormant accounts. I mean, I see so much of this where it's like, okay, you take a look at someone's Active Directory and it's like, okay, this stuff, you've got all these accounts that have been dormant for who knows how long, and no one has any idea what they're doing or why they haven't been cleaned up. And there's no process like, here's the checklist for when someone leaves of all the things that should happen. Require MFA for externally exposed applications, require MFA for remote network access and for administrative access. Continuous vulnerability management. Establish and maintain a vulnerability management process. Again, most of the smaller businesses we run into aren't doing any of this stuff. They have no process, they have no plan, they're not doing anything other than hopefully Windows patches are being applied. Excuse me. Establish and maintain a remediation process, perform automated operating system patch management, and perform automated application patch management. Well, how could you do 7.4 if you don't even know what the applications are that need to be patched, right? Again, you got to know what you have in your environment. Audit log management. Here's another one. And I won't have time to tell too much of this story today, but recently we got brought into a client where they had an interesting attack. For those of you who are familiar with the Clio Clop thing, okay? Everything you could possibly imagine about this was screwed up. They have a Windows 2008 server that's exposed to the internet, problem 1. Problem 2, oh, it gets better. It gets better. So we've got a Windows 2008 server exposed to the internet that happens to also be their main file server. It's not the domain controller, at least, okay? And it's running the Clio software that no one even knows is actually actively running. So this thing the Clio software was installed in like 2016. It's just sitting out there doing its thing. So of course they find it, the bad guys find it, and exfiltrate like every single piece of data off this server. So they didn't hit them with ransomware, and this is how they learn about this. The Secret Service shows up at their office, and they're like, hey, your data is on the dark web. And they're like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, well, here, let me show you. So there's like 16 terabytes of company data out on the dark web. And the bad guys have been sending them emails like, hey, we're going to expose you. Hey, we're going to expose you. And it's great. I should have brought some screenshots of this, because it's like, for shame, this company does not care about your privacy. This is the tack they're taking to get money out of these guys, right? So again, they don't have any idea what they have. The stuff's not getting patched. They've got this Clio software running that they didn't even know was open. So, I mean, it's like, why don't you just put a sign out in front of the building, come steal my stuff? Did
they not even know they were being extorted? Like,
well, it wasn't the spam filter, although that's a good one. Actually, they just ignored it. They couldn't find any evidence of it themselves, so they just ignored it until the Secret Service showed it. They're like, well, okay, this is a true story. So yeah, and And the reason I bring that up is because of this audit log thing. We're like, okay, so let's look at the logs, try to figure out what happened. Well, of course, they have like the minimum Windows logging turned on. There's no SIM, there's nothing. So there's really, and this happened like 5 months ago when they finally, the Secret Service showed up. So it's like, who knows what happened? And there's no way to even really go back, right? Short of getting like some forensics people in there because they don't have any of this stuff. So yeah, just complete debacle in every possible way. Establish and maintain an audit log management process, collect audit logs, ensure adequate log storage. 9, email and web browser protections. Ensure use of only fully supported browsers and email clients. I mean, who's doing that? Almost no one that we run into. People are plugging in every kind of extension known to man. And I believe that is the next frontier of badness, right? People are plugging in all these extensions in their browsers. They have no idea what they do. They have no idea who's making this garbage. They have no idea where that data is going. But hey, they save 15 cents at Temu, right? So it's all worthwhile. Use DNS filtering services, malware defenses, deploy and maintain anti-malware software, configure automatic anti-malware signature updates, and disable auto-run and autoplay for removable media. I mean, honestly, of everything we've talked about so far, that is the only thing I see on a consistent basis. And a lot of times it's, it's some crap like, well, I got the downloaded something I found off the internet. Yeah, that's a good choice. Yeah. Or what's the AVG? Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, hey, I found it on the internet. Google search. What could go wrong? Data recovery. Establish and maintain a data recovery process. So again, you see a lot of these start with you need some kind of process. And when you read what they say about the process, it's like it has to be documented. It has to be reviewed regularly. If there are changes in the organization that would require revising it, you have to do that, right? So again, inventory process, perform automated backups, protect recovery data, establish and maintain an isolated instance of recovery data. And when you dig down into these safeguards, again, they have very detailed explanation of these things that will be easy to explain to the people who have to sign the checks. 12, assure network infrastructure is up to date. So there's only one that applies to IG1. Again, even that one, we'll see switches and stuff they're not being updated. So, but if you don't even know you have it, how would you know you need to do that, right?
Wow.
Yes, so that's the answer. Vibe coding in the cloud. If you just have vibe coding in the cloud, all your problems go away.
Yeah.
So I'm done. Any questions? There are, so family 13, network monitoring and defense, there aren't any controls that apply to IG1. There are controls, but they only apply to 2 and 3. 14, okay, I think this one is really interesting because, again, we see most companies doing very little with this, if anything. In my opinion, this is probably the second biggest thing past people just being able to download whatever they want, is the lack of awareness training, especially in light of all the deepfake stuff that's out there now. Establish and maintain a security awareness program, right? So you need a program. They have all kinds of stipulations around what that would look like in order to be fully compliant with this safeguard. Train workforce members to recognize social engineering attacks. Train workforce members on authentication best practices. Train workforce on data handling best practices. Train members on the causes of unintentional data exposure, like your idiotic IoT coffee maker. Train members on recognizing and reporting security incidents. Well, that didn't really wrap that right there. Train workforce on how to identify and report enterprise assets or missing security updates. And train workforce on the dangers of connecting to and transmitting enterprise data over insecure networks. 15, service provider management. This is one of the changes in this last round. Again, I think it's one of the more important ones because, like if you look at the Target breach, it was through their HVAC contractor, right? As we turn more stuff into cloud-based services and APIs and functions and all this stuff, right? You're outsourcing more and more stuff to third parties. There's enormous risk there, right? I don't think most businesses even have the basic grasp of this stuff. So now, again, there's a bunch of additional safeguards in this family. The only one that applies to IG1 is you just need an inventory. You just need to know what you have out there, right? And I find most businesses are not doing, they really have no idea. And without going through all their invoices would really have any idea. Plus, then you have the whole shadow IT thing. And, this, again, kind of going back to the fact that most of my career was as a software guy. It was mostly building shadow software for people, right? It's like, hey, our IT department can't get this thing done. We'll hire you to build it for us. So now I've built something that IT guys don't know anything about. It's in the cloud out there somewhere. They have no idea what data is going in it. They have no idea whether users have any idea about any kind of privacy regulations. Like, for example, if you don't know, Kentucky just recently passed a data privacy law. I actually live in Northern Kentucky. I spend most of my time in Ohio, and I love to jab my Ohio friends all the time. It's like, we actually beat you to something useful for the first time in my entire life. Kentucky has actually beaten Ohio at something useful. It's shocking. Yeah. So 16, application software security. This is a pretty detailed family of things around custom software development. None of them apply to IG1. Kind of wrapping up here, incident response management, designate personnel to manage incident handling, establish and maintain contact information for reporting security incidents, and establish and maintain enterprise process for reporting incidents. And then last but not least, penetration testing. And they're saying, for small businesses, it's not in the IG1 level. So again, they've done all this work for you. Obviously, what you need is going to depend on what you already have and the maturity level of your organization and the resources you have access to. They've broken this down in another document, the cost of cyber defense, which you can download from their website. And they have this for all 3 implementation groups. And again, this is obviously just an estimate, but it gives you some sort of idea. The one thing I do find amusing is max cyber budget $50,000. A lot of the small businesses I talk to, their max cyber budget is $5. Right? It's nowhere close to $50,000. But again, it gives you some kind of idea, at least, and some talking points around, yes, sir.
This is tools, not labor.
Yes, okay. Tools only.
Because labor is going to be 10x.
Yeah. Well, no, the vibe coding is going to do that for you. Your chat bot, Perplexity, is going to just do all that for you, right?
Training.
Yeah, just point Perplexity at it and hit the button, and it'll connect all that up for you. Work like a charm, man. Okay, so what do you need to do to implement this, right? Well, you need to understand the current state of what you got. You're probably going to need some kind of executive sponsorship, which again, I would typically want to start with like a high-level IT person or the business owner, CEO, and have the bigger conversation about why these controls are important, that this is a well-known, well-vetted, globally recognized standard. And again, approach it from the business standpoint and the risk standpoint as opposed to the technical standpoint. You're going to have to create a bunch of policies as part of this. Many of these controls require policies and processes and so forth. And again, they have to be documented and they have to be reviewed. It's all described in the safeguards. You need to prioritize the safeguards. Again, for the most part, they're already prioritized for you. If you read what they're saying, the idea of start at 1, right? Implement everything in family 1, then go to 2, then go to 3. Again, that might not necessarily always make sense in your organization. You may be more mature in some places than in others. Like most people have at least some kind of antivirus, for example. But again, they've already done all the heavy lifting for you. I already hit on that. Yeah, focus on 2 to 3 safeguards at a time. They estimate that it's probably going to take at least a year for most organizations to be fully compliant with the 56 safeguards of implementation group 1. Obviously, that's going to vary widely too, depending on your resources. Consider the cloud impact. I want to come back to this because, again, in many cases, they're talking about, the entire scope of your environment, and obviously depending on the type of cloud services you may be using, and you may not even know about because somebody in the accounting department decided to sign up for something that you have no visibility into, thus the need for the inventory, right? They've already sort of helped you. It's a whole separate document about the cloud aspects of this and how they apply to these controls, and I'll hit on that in a second. Leverage whatever existing tools you can, leverage existing resources. Again, all the great resources they've put together for you. Like I said, you got to sometimes get a whole bunch of different pieces to have a complete picture of this, but almost everything you need to really fully grasp this and run with it, they've already done for you, other than the labor piece to implement it and buy the tools, right? Measure and monitor your success. Join the CIS community. They've got a very active online community. Again, all this stuff is crowdsourced. While you can pay for various different services, like their risk assessment tool, and another thing I'll show you here, there's different levels of membership. So much of this stuff is free, and there is a very active community of people that want to help out there that you can tap into. This also stolen from their documentation. Some of the additional resources, everything you could imagine, they've got it, okay? Some additional resources. So, and y'all can have this slide deck. So this cloud applicability. So this is a whole separate document, and then they're showing you here for different types of cloud services, and again, this is a super high level view. It goes into much more depth in this, how this might impact certain control families and the safeguards. So again, they've already done a lot of the thinking for you. And if you're kind of saying, okay, I'm interested in this, but I don't know that much about it, I don't really know where to start, again, they've already basically done all the work. This is a great tool, the control self-assessment tool. It will help you kind of manage the whole process. So you might want to take a look at that. And then to kind of wrap up here, the top reasons to do this, in my opinion. Well, again, it's proven, right? It's all aligned with the MITRE attack framework. It's constantly being revised. It's, many governments have said you have to do this. It aligns with all these different frameworks. I don't think you're going to find too many people out there that would say that this is not at least a well-respected thing that makes sense. They've already done the work to prioritize things for you. Again, respected. It's practical. I would, again, encourage all of you, go get the document, read through it. I think it's extremely practical and easy to understand. It's relatively cost effective. It's scalable. You've got this, again, compliance with multiple frameworks. So if you're in the defense industrial base and you care about something like CMMC and you've looked at like NIST 800-171, in my mind, that is just like a giant confusopoly of BS. And if you eventually need to get there, I would argue you could start with this. This would be a much easier to implement, much easier to sell to the leadership. You would ultimately, because of the cross mapping, be in a much better position to get to the 110 SPRS score you need for CMMC if you started with this. Sorry, one click too many. So here's a link to just about every single one of these documents I talked to. So again, y'all can have this slide deck. This will get you 99% of all the source documents I used to put this together. There's my contact information. I'm happy to connect with you. Or is that a legitimate QR code? I'll let you all decide for yourself. There's my tinfoil hat that they made for me at the office. And another great quote there, cybersecurity is national security, former NSA director, former Army General Paul Nakasone. If you don't know, one quick plug here, Queen City Con in Cincinnati. This will be the 3rd year for that. I'd love to see you all come up for this thing. I'm involved in it, but so, I'm a bit of a homer here, but it's been a blast the last 3 years, or the last 2 years. Again, to be in November, love to see you there. And that's pretty much it. So I'm happy to answer any questions, comments, snide remarks. If you're not familiar with this, I encourage you to take a hard look at it. It really is a powerful framework.